You lie down at night with one intention, to enter the state akin to sleep and imagine your desire fulfilled. Yet the moment you begin, something curious happens. You become more awake. You watch the scene. You try to hold it. You wonder whether it feels real enough. Then you ask yourself, am I drowsy yet? And before long, the very exercise intended to quiet the outer senses has made you intensely conscious of them. Then perhaps the opposite happens. You relax, intending to begin your imaginal act, and suddenly morning has come. You fell asleep before you consciously completed anything. If either experience is familiar to you, do not conclude that you cannot use the state akin to sleep. The difficulty is simpler than that. You have begun treating sleep as part of the performance. And once you understand what the state akin to sleep was actually meant to accomplish, this entire struggle becomes unnecessary. What then is the state akin to sleep actually for? It is not a test of how long you can hold an image before consciousness disappears, nor is it a requirement that you somehow catch the exact instant between imagining and sleeping. The value of this state is much simpler. As the body relaxes and the outer senses become less demanding, the mind becomes more receptive to what you are accepting inwardly. You are no longer arguing so strongly with appearances, circumstances, or the evidence of the day. That is why I asked you to approach sleep with the assumption of the wish fulfilled. But notice what happens when you begin monitoring yourself. You ask whether the scene is vivid enough. You check whether you are becoming sleepy. You try not to lose the image. In that moment, your attention has shifted away from the fulfilled experience and onto your performance of the technique. You are no longer resting in the end. You are supervising yourself, trying to reach it. So the first correction is this. Stop making sleep something you must accomplish correctly. The state akin to sleep is useful because it quiets resistance. And if your effort to perform the technique is creating more resistance, then the method has begun working against its own purpose. Suppose you begin your imaginal act and discover that instead of becoming quieter, you become more alert. Do not immediately assume that you must try harder. Very often, the opposite is required. If you are holding a long scene, watching every detail, correcting the picture, checking the feeling, and repeating it again and again, you may no longer be imagining naturally. You may simply be keeping the mind occupied. So reduce the act. Choose one brief implication of fulfillment. It may be a single sentence you would naturally hear, one touch you would naturally feel, or one small moment that could only belong to the fulfilled state. Let it be short enough that you do not have to struggle to maintain it. If a visual scene continues to stimulate you, leave the picture alone. Hear a few simple words instead. Perhaps it is done, or isn't it wonderful? Repeat them gently, as you would a lullaby, until the words awaken the feeling they imply. Let the words carry the meaning of completion. The purpose is not to keep yourself mentally busy until sleep finally overtakes you. The purpose is to allow one fulfilled implication to become more natural than the problem you carried to bed. And once that simple implication has been accepted, you do not need to keep proving it to yourself all night. Now suppose the opposite happens. You lie down intending to imagine, but before the scene has properly begun, sleep overtakes you. You wake in the morning and immediately conclude, I failed. I did not complete the scene. But a long scene is not required. If sleep comes quickly, do not struggle against it by constructing a more elaborate imaginal drama. Condense the act to one simple implication of fulfillment. Feel the weight of a ring already upon your finger. Hear one familiar voice say, I'm so happy for you. Feel yourself lying in the bed you would occupy if your desire were already fulfilled. You do not need to complete a sequence of events. You need only enter one brief experience that would be natural if the wish were already fulfilled. And if you know that sleep usually overtakes you very quickly, begin your imaginal act a little earlier, while you are still sufficiently awake to give it your attention. Do not wait until consciousness is almost gone, and then struggle to form the scene. The simpler the implication, the easier it is to enter without effort. Remember this, sleep coming quickly is not your enemy. What matters is the state you consent to inwardly before you surrender yourself to sleep. How then do you know when you have done enough? Not by counting repetitions, not by asking whether the image was vivid enough, and not by forcing yourself to remain conscious until you can prove that you carried the scene into sleep. The imaginal act has served its purpose when the fulfillment begins to feel natural rather than something still to be attained. There is a difference between repeating something because you are feeling it natural and repeating it because you are afraid that one more repetition is required to make it happen. When that strain appears, stop. If one brief scene has given you the sense of completion, let it rest. If a few simple words have brought you into quiet acceptance, let them be enough. And if sleep comes, allow it to come without standing guard over the technique. Do not rise the next morning and begin questioning whether you imagined correctly, whether you fell asleep at the proper moment, or whether the act must now be repeated to correct some imagined failure. The technique serves the state. The state does not serve the technique. So tonight, imagine simply, accept gently, and let sleep do what sleep naturally does. Now, let us go into the silence